Welcome back after the break. Now, another major story which has got the attention of everybody because it is affecting everybody's life in Pakistan. I am, of course, speaking about load shedding. The government announced over 2 hours of daily load shedding due to rising costs. Now, I'm going to explain to you why they're saying it, because the press conference that was held today by the Minister of Power explained why there is so much load shedding. But let me also say it on record that every household in Pakistan is experiencing much more than 2 hours of load shedding. So clearly this claim that it's only 2 hours by the government is not accurate. The government initially issued this notification which said that the hydropower production had dropped by roughly around 2,000 megawatts during the night, and therefore there was a shortfall, which essentially means there wasn't enough water because there aren't enough rains. But this is not the real cause, because this happens every year. There is a shortfall, but we don't experience so much load shedding that is happening in Pakistan. It turns out that there is another reason, and the reason is what the minister said in his press conference, Awais Laghari. He said that it is primarily due to the suspension of gas from, of course, the Strait of Hormuz. It comes from Qatar, traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. And because we don't have gas ever since war started, LNG specifically, that is impacting our power generation. And this explains to you, this chart, how much we are dependent actually on this imported gas. The total sector-wise gas consumption last year, the figure that we have, look at power generation, that's 31%. Of course, domestic is 25%, fertilizer 24%, general industry 18%, commercial 2%. So this is the area which is being impacted, and because we are so dependent on gas, suddenly there is a shortfall, as a result of which now we are having to suffer load shedding. Qatar, of course, is Pakistan's main LNG supplier under 2 long-term contracts. That, of course, because Qatar has declared force majeure, which in other simple words means that because of external circumstances, they will not be able to fulfill their legal contracts. The reason, of course, is war. And that's why Pakistan is now at a stage where it is not possible for the government to provide us electricity constantly. That is a key issue. But can we just, for once, lay the blame somewhere else? The matters are not that simple. So how do we interpret all this? And how long will this load shedding continue? Peak summer is upon us. Next couple of months, if the war ends, and we all hope it does, thanks to the efforts of Pakistan, will load shedding also end? That's the key question, which we will answer with the help of 2 experts. So here's the strange thing. Whenever load shedding starts in Pakistan, the first blame goes to the government, and for the right reasons. We've been suffering load shedding for decades, gone through very serious waves of load shedding, and then of course there were many years when there was no load shedding. Of course, power policy, power sector is one of the weakest links in our governance. But the return of load shedding, as I was just talking about earlier, has now become a source of major concern. At a time when Pakistan is being celebrated all over the world for its role as a mediator, and is now shuttling between all the major countries, including, of course, the US and Iran. At that particular time, load shedding has become a domestic issue which is diverting attention from the major story that we've all been following for months. As a result of which, today the power minister did a press conference and explained in very simple terms that for once, possibly, and those are my words, it wasn't the government to blame, it was the war to blame, which is why there is load shedding. And the moment the Straits of Hormuz opens up and we start getting supplies of gas, this load shedding will end. Is it actually as simple as that, or is there any other deeper reason which we are not aware of? To try and interpret this, we are joined by two experts. Dr. Khalid Waheed is a research fellow at STPI. He's a PhD in energy economics and is also a vocal advocate for integrating sustainable energy and environmental considerations into economic policy. So clearly, he is one of the important experts in the sector that we have. And joining me also is Ms. Khurram Hussain, Pakistan's premier columnist and journalist when it comes to economics and business. And of course, Khurram has also been following the power sector for a very long time. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Khalid Waleed, so should we just say that the government is not to blame at all? And for once, the reason for load shedding lies outside of Pakistan?
Thank you so much, Fahd. It has two answers. Yes, it is a fuel crisis, imported fuel crisis, because we cannot import RLNG, and RLNG was projected to be 15% of our total electricity generation this year. Because of that 15% not available in Pakistan, we are facing this load shedding. So RLNG is to be blamed, but we lack integrated planning. We lack long-term vision when it comes to energy planning or electricity planning. We go into fist-fighting mode, very short-term solutions. So in that regard, I think government is to be blamed because just 2-3 months back, government cuts in incentivization for solarization.
Dr. let me come to that. Let me come to that. But first, let's just establish this basic thing. So you're actually agreeing with the Power Minister, Mr. Awais Laghari, when he says that for this load shedding that has started happening in the last couple of days and is happening for a number of hours, depending on which city you are in, for this particular phase of load shedding, the government has no blame. You would agree with him?
Yeah, for a short period of time, yes, he's right. Imported fuel is to be blamed and RLNG is to be blamed.
Okay, let me come back to what you were referring to earlier because that's important. But Khurram, would you also agree, for once, if I may add, with the government that that this time we can't blame the government for this load shedding?
Well, but the thing is, it doesn't matter who you blame. You're still left with the problem on your hands. So I would certainly blame the government for not having messaged this out properly. And, the load shedding, when it began, took a lot of people by surprise. People should have known that this is coming, and there should have been schedules drawn up and appropriate messaging done that we are approaching a time period when prolonged period of load shedding will begin, and this is what the schedules are going to look like. That obviously didn't happen. So when people wake up suddenly and say, what's going on, then they will reach for whatever conclusions they can. And at that point, to do an angry press conference, like the minister did, he carried a really sort of an angry demeanor, like he's mad at the rest of us. That is even less helpful. It just comes across defensive. The fact of the matter is that, yes, this was known all along. When the closure of the Straits of Hormuz happened, it was known that fuel shortages are going to begin to intensify. Now, they didn't intensify as much as we had originally anticipated in some areas because the government of Pakistan got some extraordinary support from the government of Saudi Arabia, and even some from the UAE, and was able to source some liquid supplies like crude oil and even a shipment of diesel at a time when there's a severe diesel shortage elsewhere in the world, and were more or less able to keep the liquid fuel supply chain running. But where natural gas is concerned, Pakistan gets all of its natural gas from inside the Straits. There are not many alternative sources for Pakistan to reach for. And the last shipment that came in was when the very early days of the war, I believe it may have departed the Straits even before the closure happened. And since then, we have not received any more. As a good doctor also just reminded us, somewhere between 10 to 15% of our total power generation takes place on imported gas, on imported LNG. That's a huge hit to take when the original supplies begin to run out.
And before we go deeper,
we should have seen this coming.
We should have seen this coming, and I agree with you that the government should have been much more should have started preparing the people for what could have happened. What could happen? The sudden start of load shedding, of course, has created a lot of confusion, and the blame instinctively is towards the government. Even though this time around, for this immediate crisis, it is the war which is to blame. But Dr. Khalid Waheed, again, just looking at the timeline. So let's assume, let me make a very optimistic projection, and that is that even if there is a deal between the US and Iran brokered by Pakistan, as we know that our diplomacy is in overdrive, if that were to happen at the earliest, let's say before the ceasefire expires, and then in the next week or two, I'm being extremely optimistic, the Strait of Hormuz opens up. From then onwards, again, the supply that has been disrupted for us, that's not going to start coming in immediately, because those plants in Qatar, for example, that were hit or that are not in operation, they're going to take time getting back to normal working conditions, then transporting that cargo to Pakistan. So very generally speaking, if peace were to actually break out in the next week or two, how long before this load shedding ends?
Well, you're right, but if you see the estimates at the Ras Laffan facility of Qatar, there are estimates that if war stops right now, they would take around 2 to 3 years to bring that RLNG capacity back to the before war quantities. So this crisis would persist, particularly for Pakistan, because if you see February, March, April, these are very low consumption months in Pakistan in terms of electricity. But when it comes to end of April, May, June, July, these are peak months, summer months in Pakistan, and you rely on these peaker plants of RLNG, particularly in night times. So I am seeing worsening load shedding in coming months, particularly in peaking plants, as we are seeing. Second option is that we replace that RLNG consumption with RFO plants, and RFO plants are very expensive. If we compare it with RLNG plants, we have projected that before war, the price was for 1 unit of electricity was around 23 rupee per unit, but for RFO it is 45 rupee per unit. So this is that delta that government is fearing. So this is where you need to bring balance between rising cost of electricity and load shedding. I think government has opted for the easier solution of load shedding.
But I mean, yes, it's easier, but not really. I mean, Khurram, if you agree with what Dr. Saab is saying, that means that even in the best case scenario, in terms of an agreement and a peace, even then we are looking at this load shedding for, he's saying, couple of years. Is that something that you also think is accurate?
Actually, what he said was that the repairing of the gas fields that have been damaged could take a couple of years. And he's right. I mean, those are the reported figures, 2 to 3 years. This is from the attacks on the South Pars gas field. But whether or not supplies to Pakistan take that long to resume is a separate question. Because Pakistan will be, one assumes, high on the list of priority countries to start receiving once supplies resume, on account of the fact that we already have a supply contract, at least one of which will still be valid. One of those is about to expire, I think, in the month of April. But one still has a few more months to go before it ends. But also because of the goodwill that Pakistan has earned. But nevertheless, short of a couple, I do entirely anticipate that for many, many months to come, this situation of extreme disruption, disruption meaning both supply as well as price disruptions, is going to persist. Even if we take the best possible case scenario, let's say that today the war ends and the Straits of Hormuz are opened up. Let's just say that happens, right? Even then, for normal flows of oil and gas to resume through the Straits will take the better part of the year 2026 before that happens. We saw this happen after COVID, for example. Once the lockdowns were eased, it took many months before, just for the shipping lines to sort of sort out the mess that was created by virtue of the fact that all the cargoes were in one port, all the ships were in another. Over here right now, all the empty tankers are somewhere else. The demand is all over here. So by the time those empty tankers are brought to the Gulf and laden up and go back out again, it could be a long time. And then the damage done to the infrastructure, the refineries that have been hit, the refineries that have shut down operations, and the gas fields that have been hit. All of this work itself through will take a long time, and normality will be a long time coming. So we are in this situation of extreme supply and price disruption for months to come, even in the best case scenario. And I think people should be prepared for the fact that there will be.
Okay, so basically we are looking. So Dr. Saab, we are basically looking at a very unpalatable kind of and I don't know if that's the right word, but a very unpleasant scenario where definitely for these, even in the best case scenario that Khurram was referring to, these peak summer months, every Pakistani will have to endure load shedding, and on top of that, we are going to have to pay high electricity rates, at least for this summer that is just peaking, in a couple of weeks. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're right. And it is not the end of it. Right now, there is load shedding, electricity rates would be higher, and it will encourage people to go buy solar and install solar panels on their rooftop. And now net metering incentives have been reduced by the government. So there is no incentive to connect these solar panels to the grid. They will go completely off grid. And once this crisis is over, there would be more solar in Pakistan and less demand for national grid, which in turn increase the capacity charges for Pakistani, those who cannot afford solar and are on the national grid, which means national grid would be more expensive. So it would be a vicious cycle starting from this crisis, and it will not over by end of this crisis as well. So there would be another crisis standing right in front of us after this crisis as well. So we need to have integrated planning, particularly in terms of incentivization of renewable energy, particularly rooftop solars. And then comes the battery storage facilities, which government is completely ignoring. If they install battery energy storage facilities or incentivize battery energy for consumers, they would install batteries at their home, and they will store electricity in the daytime, and then they can consume that electricity in the evening, so that there is no electricity peak in the evening, so that government is not running expensive power plants or load shedding. So that's that.
Okay, so Khurram, finally, you've been writing very regularly and very clearly in terms of how the solar policy has rolled out is not the right thing to do. But again, I think now with this crisis hitting, it is a perfect storm where wrong policy, big crisis combines to produce this horrible scenario for Pakistanis. Do you think the government should now actually review its solar policy?
I don't think they need to do anything here, Fahad. The good news here is, the bad news, though, we've been discussing, that there is a big crisis and it's going to stay for a while. The good news here is that there is a solution. And the solution lies in people increasingly adopting solar and going off grid. This is something that has already been happening. And this particular crisis is providing an impetus to accelerate that process. And I agree with Dr. Saab when he says that more people are likely to take that route now. And once they do that, people would have found their own way out of this persistent problem of rising cost of grid electricity and the sort of unreliability of its supply. And I think there is, and the crisis has also presented Pakistan an opportunity to look for ways to ease its external financing burdens, of which the capacity payment charges that you referred to are one example. I think after this crisis, Pakistan will have some standing to be able to tell its creditors and to tell some categories of foreign investors from China that, look, we have suffered quite a great deal as well, and it would be nice to have a little bit of room in which to help invest in our people. And I think that would be forthcoming, given the amount of diplomatic capital that Pakistan has earned by virtue of the game that they have played in helping, the role they have played in helping bring the war to an end. So opportunities are there too at the same time, and I think they should take those opportunities.
Well, that's $1 million question. Let's see if our economic policy or solar policy can also pay the kind of dividends that our diplomatic policy is paying. Huge challenge for the government. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you. And that's the full frame for tonight. See you tomorrow.